Hey, amazing people. We know you guys love these stories, but most of you listening aren't subscribing. Our subs have been quite low this month, and we're really close to 20,000 subscribers, so please be a legend and smash the subscribe button. And like this video, it will really help support us. Thank you so much.
I moved to Seattle right after college to start my first job. I didn't know anyone in the city except for my Aunt Jane and her family, who graciously offered to let me stay with them for a few months while I got settled. On my first day of work, I met this guy named Mark. He was really good looking, tall with amazing hair and a great smile. Come to find out, he was the lead singer of a pretty popular local band, too. We hit it off right away and started hanging out all the time. I met his friends, his mom, his little brother. It was so nice to have an instant group like that since I didn't know anyone. Looking back now, there were a lot of red flags with Mark that I ignored. He drank way too much and was always smoking. His apartment was a total dump. I found girl stuff there sometimes, bobby pins, chapstick, scrunchies, that he just brushed off when I asked about them. And there was the band thing. Lead singer in a band. Not exactly the kind of guy you bring home to mom and dad. But I was young and lonely in a new city, so I overlooked all that because he was so fun and cute. Then one day I get a call from Mark saying he has lice, and that I probably had it too. Lice. I wanted to die. I had to tell my sweet Aunt Jane that everyone in their house might have lice now too. I was absolutely mortified, but didn't want to tell them it was from a guy I was seeing. Luckily, they didn't end up with lice, but they weren't too happy with me. I felt so guilty I offered to deep clean their whole house. After my embarrassing lice treatment, I called Mark back and offered to come help him clean his place too. At this point, I still wasn't even mad at him about the lice. I was just fixated on getting the situation handled. When he answered, he said he didn't want me to come over anymore, that we shouldn't see each other again, and that was it. I moved out of my aunt's shortly after and got my own little studio apartment. I found a new job too. I just wanted a fresh start. My aunt and I laugh about that time I brought lice into her pristine home now, but back then it was so humiliating. For years I had this weird paranoia about getting lice again. I'd freak out any time my head itched. In hindsight, Mark was clearly seeing other girls while we were dating. Who knows where the lice came from? He was a total loser. Unfortunately, he wasn't the last one either. I dated a string of guys who had major issues: alcohol, drugs, cheating. I guess I just had terrible taste and was drawn to the wrong type. After Mark, there was Alex. We worked together at my new job. He seemed so nice and friendly at first, always offering to give me coffee or help with projects. I thought it was sweet, but then the coffee orders turned into demanding I pick up his dry cleaning. The project helped turn into doing all his work for him. He progressively got more and more controlling. He'd get mad if I talked to male coworkers or wore anything even slightly revealing. I was scared to set him off, so I just tried to keep the peace. It was an awful few months before I got the nerve to break it off. Next was my bartender phase. I started going out to bars alone, just wanting to meet new people. I ended up meeting a bunch of different bartenders. All were loads of fun for a hot second before they showed their true colors. There was the one who forgot his wallet every time we went out. The one who stood me up regularly but then would reappear with some elaborate excuse. The one who I'm pretty sure gave me a fake name after we hooked up. I don't know why I expected any different from those relationships. Nothing meaningful comes from going home with the bartender after last call. But I was feeling lonely and thought the connection was real. In hindsight, I just liked the attention and free drinks. After that stream of disasters, I took a long dating hiatus. I decided I needed to figure out who I was again before trying to be with someone new. I reconnected with old friends, picked up new hobbies, and worked on myself. It was really empowering to realize I didn't need to be with someone to be happy. I was enough on my own. Then one night my friend convinced me to sign up for one of those trendy new dating apps. I was reluctant at first, but she said it was an easy way to dip my toe back into dating without too much pressure. So I picked a cute photo and wrote a clever bio and gave it a try. I ended up matching with this guy named Rob. His profile made him seem sweet, handsome, responsible. Basically the total opposite of my former disasters. Rob and I exchanged messages for a week or so before meeting up at a bar one night. I was nervous, but he immediately put me at ease. We ended up talking for hours and closing the bar down. Rob walked me home and we made plans for a real date that weekend. I almost canceled the date out of anxiety and past dating wounds, but I forced myself to give him a chance. From the moment I met Rob on that first date, something just felt different. He was kind, thoughtful, funny. For once, I didn't feel like I had to pretend or conceal parts of myself. We both opened up and were totally honest with each other. We ended up dating for a year before Rob proposed on a romantic weekend getaway. Rob and I got married 6 months later in a beautiful outdoor ceremony. All my friends and family loved him, which confirmed I finally picked a good one. A few months after the wedding, we bought our dream house, a cute craftsman on a hill with an amazing view of the city. Now, instead of losers, I come home to Rob's delicious 4-course dinners every night. He even holds my hand while we grocery shop. All those terrible dating experiences were worth it to finally find my true match. The lice, the liars, the cheaters, that made me appreciate what I have now even more. My dating horror stories led me to my happy ending with Rob. Though our relationship isn't perfect, it's real. I'd never feel like I have to pretend or hide parts of myself from him. We balance each other out and support one another. I finally understand what true love feels like. While my early 20s were filled with romantic disasters, everything happens for a reason. Those wrong turns and heartbreaks put me on the path toward Rob. They forced me to learn important lessons about self-respect and recognizing red flags. I now have the tools to foster a healthy relationship based on openness, trust, and compromise. All that matters is it led me here to this content place in life. For that, I can be grateful for even my craniest dating stories. The past prepared me for the perfect man I have by my side today. I still remember the day I met her so clearly. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and I had just finished grabbing a coffee before heading home. As I walked down the street, my phone dinged with a notification from the dating app I had downloaded a few weeks prior. Hi, I'm Samantha. I see you're into hiking. I love the outdoors too. Her opening message immediately caught my eye. We began chatting, and she seemed witty and outgoing. After talking for a few days, we exchanged numbers and planned to meet up that weekend. When we met at the cafe, Samantha looked just like her photos. She had long brown hair, bright green eyes, and a bubbly personality that immediately put me at ease. We ended up talking for hours. I was amazed by how much we had in common. Our tastes in music, love of old films, even obscure talents like juggling. It felt like she already knew me so well. Over the next few weeks, we continued going on dates, and I really started to fall for Samantha. She was funny, charming, and so easy to talk to. But then strange things started happening. We'd be chatting about a new restaurant opening up, and she mentioned, "Oh, right, that's near your old apartment on Maple Street, isn't it?" Maple Street. I had lived there years ago. I had never told her about it. Another time, we were discussing books, and she asked if I had read a certain novel lately. It was a book I had read as a kid, but hadn't mentioned to anyone in years. Each time, she'd brush it off if I asked how she knew those details. "You must have told me once," she'd say. But I knew I hadn't. One night over dinner, she brought up a traumatic experience from my childhood that I had never told anyone about. I felt the blood drain from my face. When I demanded to know how she knew that, Samantha just giggled and said I must have told her when we first met. I knew I hadn't. As I lay in bed that night, my mind was racing. How did she know so much about me and my past? That's when I started digging deeper into her social media accounts. Scrolling back, I realized all of her profiles were only a few months old. Every photo or post was recent. Why were there no old photos or check-ins? On a hunch, I did a reverse image search on her profile pictures. Several came up attached to other accounts now deactivated. Samantha wasn't who she claimed to be online. I stayed up all night going through every post, comment, and photo she had interacted with across the internet. Pieces started coming together. A comment on an old post of mine from a now deactivated account. Being tagged in the background of a photo at an event I had gone to years before we met. All the likes and replies were from her. She had been watching me, following me, learning everything about me for years. My hands shook as I typed her name into Google. I felt sick as articles came up about previous stalking charges and restraining orders against her. Samantha had lied about her identity and was obsession, following every digital footprint I left behind. She knew my past because she had become a part of it long before we had ever met. I never saw her again after that night. I shut down all my social media accounts, changed my number, and kept looking over my shoulder for weeks after. It's been months now, but the paranoia still lingers. My friends keep telling me I need to get back out there and start dating again, but I just can't bring myself to do it. I keep thinking about Samantha's smiling face that first night at the cafe, how I had no idea what was to come. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe meeting someone online again. For now, it's just me and the lingering feeling that someone is still watching. The whole experience has left me shaken to my core. I find myself questioning everything now, wondering if new people I meet might recognize me from my past online presence that I can never fully erase. When I walk down the street, I examine every face, looking for one that seems oddly familiar. At night, I still check and recheck that every lock on my doors and windows is secured. I know my paranoia is spiraling out of control, but I can't seem to stop it. My therapist keeps encouraging me to get out more, make new connections, and open myself back up to the world. She says what happened with Samantha is rare and I can't let one bad experience close me off entirely. I want to believe her, but it's easier said than done. The violating betrayal of my privacy and the manipulation I endured makes it difficult to trust anyone new. I find myself holding back now, afraid to reveal too much for fear of being hurt again. Part of me knows I will need to date again eventually if I ever want to find a true partner, but the idea fills me with anxiety. I've considered trying a different dating app where I could be anonymous at first, but the fear of matching with someone like Samantha paralyzes me every time I try to create a new profile. For now, I've accepted that I need more time to heal and rebuild my sense of safety. One day, when my nightmares about her stop and I don't glance over my shoulder wherever I go, maybe I'll feel ready to put myself out there again. Until then, I'm focusing on strengthening the friendships I do have and finding joy in solitary hobbies like hiking and reading. When I'm out in nature or lost in a good book, I can forget about the darkness of what happened for a little while. The path forward feels long and unclear, but I'm trying to take it one day at a time. With patience and self-care, I hope to reclaim my capacity for trust, connection, and intimacy. And someday, when the time is right, I will open my heart again without the looming specter of Samantha there to haunt me. For now, I'm simply grateful to feel the warmth of the sun again as I continue down my road to recovery, one step at a time. I hadn't dated anyone seriously since Lisa broke my heart 5 years ago. Our relationship was intense but short-lived. She knew me better than anyone, like we shared the same brain. The breakup was bad and I never got full closure, so running into someone who reminded me of her felt ominous yet intriguing. Sitting alone at Murphy's bar last Friday, I noticed a woman staring at me from across the room. She looked so much like Lisa. Same piercing green eyes, wavy brown hair, cute nose. I chalked it up to coincidence until she approached me. "Hi, I'm Tasha. You're even more handsome in person," she said with a flirtatious grin. I was caught off guard but flattered. We got talking and really hit it off. Tasha was smart, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in me. How could someone who looked so much like my ex be so easy to talk to? We exchanged numbers and met up a few nights later. Over dinner, I found out Tasha was new to town for a marketing job. She asked thoughtful questions and laughed at my dumb jokes. Lisa used to love my corny humor. I dismissed the similarities, figuring she just reminded me of Lisa because of her looks. Things accelerated quickly. We had immediate chemistry and spent every free moment together. On our third date, Tasha revealed she had looked me up and knew about my breakup with Lisa. She apologized for bringing it up, saying she just wanted me to know I could trust her. I was a little weirded out, but also oddly relieved that she knew about my past relationship trauma. As we continued dating, more resemblances appeared. Tasha referenced inside jokes Lisa and I had, often calling me by my old pet name. She brought me to restaurants Lisa loved, but few others knew about, saying she saw them on my social media. Lisa's favorite flowers, perfume, and even shampoo appeared at my place when Tasha would visit. She pulled out all of Liz's old tricks to flirt with me and knew exactly how to make me feel loved. By week 5 of dating, I was freaked out by the similarities, but also hooked on how Tasha made me feel. It was like Lisa came back into my life. Tasha would say things no one else knew about my ex, dropping personal details about Lisa's family, friends, and our private moments together. Had Lisa told her about us? Was she stalking my social media and Lisa's too? I decided to do some investigating of my own. One evening when Tasha was in the shower, I peeked at her phone while she was in the bathroom. My heart dropped as I scrolled through old messages between her and Lisa. She had reached out to my ex before moving here, asking pointed questions about me, our relationship, and quirks only Lisa would know. The texts revealed Tasha had orchestrated this whole thing to get close to me. Confronting Tasha would be hard, but I knew I had to do it. The next night at dinner, I asked her point blank how she knew so much about my relationship with Lisa. Tasha fumbled over her words before finally admitting she was Lisa's cousin. They grew up together and were very close. When Lisa dumped me years ago, she was devastated to see her cousin so heartbroken and always regretted how things ended between us. Once she moved to town, she looked me up, feeling like we were meant to reconnect. Tasha apologized for deceiving me, but said her feelings were real. She hadn't meant to hurt me. She just wanted us to have a second chance, like Lisa wished she could have had. I was horrified. Tasha had infiltrated my life under false pretenses to try and restart my old relationship. She knew private details about me no stranger would and orchestrated coincidences to reel me in. I felt violated and betrayed. I told her to leave and not contact me again. Blocking Tasha, I sent a text to the one person who might have answers, Lisa. She called immediately, as shocked as I was. Lisa had no idea her cousin moved here or was pretending to be her. She felt violated too and was so sorry Tasha dragged her into this creepy scheme. Lisa hadn't talked to her cousin in years and promised she'd tell her family to keep Tasha away from both of us. I decided not to file a restraining order, wanting to put Tasha and the bizarre experience behind me. Lisa and I had a long overdue conversation and finally got the closure we needed all those years ago. She didn't know why Tasha would concoct such an elaborate ruse and wished she could make sense of her cousin's disturbing behavior. I could hear the pain in Lisa's voice. She was also an innocent victim in all this. In the weeks after, paranoia started to creep up on me. I kept thinking I was seeing Tasha around town, at my gym, in the coffee shop, down my street. My mind was just playing tricks on me, but I became obsessed with checking the locks at night and monitoring my security camera footage. I finally decided to talk to a therapist to deal with the anxiety fallout from Tasha's deception. With professional help, I started to feel more grounded. The therapist helped me see how unresolved feelings about Lisa made me vulnerable to someone exploiting our past. I had ignored red flags with Tasha because deep down I wanted to relive that old intimacy. She filled a void and knew exactly how to hook me with familiarity. I'm now focusing on healing and building connections that feel right, not reminiscent of the past. My brush with romantic deception taught me the value of trusting your instincts. You can't ignore red flags or give someone endless chances just because they resemble an old flame. This tale of mistaken identity was a harsh reminder to live and love authentically. Letting go of exes is easier said than done, but keeping the past alive through surrogates only prevents real growth. I'll remember that moving forward in my dating life. What happened with Tasha was disturbing and damaging, but also a chance to reset my romantic patterns. This time, I'll make sure any new love feels like a fresh start, not a reboot. It started off so innocently. I met her at a friend's party. She was cute, funny, and we really hit it off. After a few weeks of dating, things were going great. That's when the weirdness started. At first, it was small things. Apps opening on my phone randomly, strange messages being sent from my accounts that I didn't write. I chalked it up to a glitchy phone, but then it kept happening. She would reference things that we had texted about that I didn't remember sending. She made comments about my social media posts right after I had posted them. It was like she was seeing things in real time without me showing her. I started to get suspicious. Was she hacked into my account somehow? Was she tracking my phone? I changed all my passwords, logged out of all devices, turned location services off. Nothing worked. She would still make comments about my private messages and photos right after I had sent or posted them. It was like she had access directly to my phone. One day, I left my phone on the counter when I went to the bathroom. When I came back, apps were open that I didn't leave open. She must have gotten into my phone and was monitoring everything I was doing. When I asked her about it, she dodged the question and acted like I was crazy. Things got worse from there. She would reference detailed information about my life, my work schedule, details of conversations I had over text with friends, even the model of the car I was considering buying. It's like she knew everything about me. I felt violated and knew she must have put spyware on my devices. When I confronted her again, demanding she admit what she had done, she just laughed. She told me she knew everything about me, my social security number, my browsing history, my deepest secrets. I was floored. How could she know all this unless she had completely hacked my digital life? She said she wasn't going to stop, that we were connected now. She knew things about me no one else knew, and she could destroy my reputation at any moment. I felt sick to my stomach realizing the power she had over me. I ended things immediately. I was terrified. Who was this person I had trusted? What would she do with all the private information she had collected on me? I took my devices to professionals to sweep for spyware. They found all kinds of monitoring software buried deep in my phone, computer, even my TV and Wi-Fi network. She had infiltrated every aspect of my digital life. I changed all my accounts, got new devices. I let my employer and bank know what had happened in case she tried to access my finances or work servers. I was paranoid she still had ways of spying on me that I couldn't detect. I kept seeing movement outside my house at night. Was she still watching me? I avoided anything with a camera or microphone, unplugged my Alexa device. Who knows what she could access? I felt like I was losing my mind wondering what she knew, what she would do with it. A person I had trusted had violated my privacy in the most intimate, insidious ways. I still have nightmares about her, imagining her out there with an encyclopedic catalog of my private life at her fingertips. She completely eroded my sense of security. I don't know if I'll ever be able to date again without constantly questioning if someone has access to my private messages, photos, or accounts. She poisoned intimacy for me in ways I'm still struggling to recover from. I never want to feel so exposed and vulnerable again. But now I know there are predators out there who will infiltrate every crevice of your digital life if you let them an even inch. Never again will I let someone have that power over me. Never again. In the months since, I've tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy. Changing all my passwords, getting new devices, moving to a new place helped initially, but the paranoia still creeps up on me. I'll be on a date, and my phone will glitch slightly, and I'll find myself spiraling, wondering if she's still tracking me, spying on me. I'll toss and turn at night, imagining her poring over private photos and messages. Every buzz or notification still sets my heart racing, makes me wonder if she's found a way back in. I know rationally it's unlikely. The tech experts assured me they completely scrubbed my accounts and devices of her spyware, but her presence still haunts me. Dating again has been a struggle. I find myself holding back, unsure if I can trust anyone with access to my digital life again. When seeing my date pick up their phone, I might immediately go into the worst case scenario. I know I'm not being fair to them, but I can't seem to stop the distrust creeping in. My friends have been supportive, reassuring me that what happened was an extreme violation by one deceptive person. I want to believe most people would never breach trust like that, but my sense of safety and intimacy has been shattered. I used to be an open book in relationships, sharing everything. Now I find myself secretive, keeping everyone at a distance. I know to truly move on, I need to work on rebuilding trust, both in potential partners and in technology itself. My devices and accounts don't have to be something to fear if secured properly, and vulnerability in relationships can be beautiful when it's with someone who respects boundaries. But that level of openness requires a leap of faith I'm still struggling to muster. I know the paranoia and walls I've put up won't just disappear overnight. Healing from having my privacy violated so appallingly will take time, but hopefully one day I'll feel secure enough in myself to truly let someone in again. Until then, I'm taking it one cautious day at a time, working on believing there are good people out there worthy of trust, and learning how to protect my digital life in smarter ways without letting it rule me. What happened showed me just how insidiously technology can be misused, but it doesn't have to control my life or relationships if I don't let it. It was our fifth date, and things were going well with James. We met on a dating app a few months ago, and I was really starting to like him. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, so when he invited me over to his place for the first time, I was excited. James lived in a quaint, older home tucked away on a quiet, tree-lined street. As he gave me the grand tour, I couldn't help but admire the character and craftsmanship of the place. The wood floors creaked softly underfoot, and sunlight streamed in through large windows, casting a warm glow throughout. It felt cozy and inviting. We eventually made our way upstairs, and that's when I noticed one of the bedroom doors was kept firmly shut. When I pointed it out and asked what was inside, James just laughed it off, saying it was just storage and not to worry about it. His response struck me as a bit odd. He seemed almost defensive, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. But I didn't push the issue, figuring it was probably nothing. Over the next several weeks, as our relationship progressed, I found myself thinking more and more about that mysterious off-limits room. Whenever I'd bring it up, James would change the subject or make a joke, always keeping me at arm's length. A part of me wanted to respect his privacy, but another part of me was consumed by curiosity. One night, after James had left for work, I finally decided to take a peek. My heart raced as I slowly turned the doorknob and peered inside. What I saw there made my blood run cold. The room was filled floor to ceiling with personal belongings, clothes, photographs, even locks of hair, all neatly cataloged and labeled. It was a disturbing collection, clearly belonging to past girlfriends. As I stepped further into the room, my gaze fell upon a leather-bound journal sitting on a desk in the corner. Hands trembling, I opened it and began to read. The journal entries detailed James' twisted plan to manipulate and isolate me, just as he had done with the women whose belongings surrounded me. He wrote about slowly eroding my self-confidence, turning me against my friends and family until I was completely dependent on him. The sheer callousness of his words made me sick to my stomach. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in horror, but the sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted me back to reality. Panicked, I hastily returned the journal to its place and fled the room, shutting the door behind me. I barely made it out the front door before James walked through it, a cheerful smile on his face. "Hey, you're home early," he exclaimed, moving to give me a hug. I instinctively recoiled, my heart pounding in my chest. "I am not feeling well," I stammered, desperate to get away from him. "I'm just going to head home." James looked puzzled, but didn't protest. As I drove away, I could feel his eyes boring into the back of my head. I knew then that I had to get as far away from him as possible. Over the next few days, I was a wreck. I barely slept, constantly looking over my shoulder, terrified that James would show up at my door. I contemplated going to the police, but I had no solid proof, only my word against his. And what if he somehow found out that I had discovered his 6 secrets? The thought of what he might do to me was enough to keep me paralyzed with fear. Eventually, I mustered the courage to reach out to my closest friends and family, tentatively sharing what I had found. To my relief, they believed me and rallied around me, offering support and a safe place to stay. With their help, I was able to distance myself from James, cutting off all communication and moving to a new apartment. It's been several months now, and I'm still trying to piece my life back together. The trauma of that night has left me anxious and distrustful, always on high alert, but I'm slowly healing with the help of therapy and the unwavering love and support of the people who care about me. Looking back, I can't believe I was so blind to James' true nature. The warning signs were there all along, from his reluctance to let me into that mysterious room to his constant efforts to isolate me. I should have trusted my instincts, but the fear of losing him clouded my judgment. Now I'm just grateful to have escaped before it was too late. I shudder to think of what might have happened if I hadn't stumbled upon that journal. James' journal entries were a stark reminder that there are truly evil people in this world, people who will stop at nothing to satisfy their own twisted desires. As I move forward, I'm committed to being more vigilant, to never again ignoring the warning signs, and I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others avoid falling victim to similar predators. Because the thought of another innocent person suffering the same fate as me is just too unbearable to bear. I thought I had finally found the one. His name was Mick, and he seemed to be everything I had ever hoped for in a partner. Successful, charming, and emotionally available. It was almost too good to be true. In the beginning, everything was perfect. We would spend hours talking, laughing, and getting lost in each other's company. He was attentive, affectionate, and made me feel like the most special woman in the world. But as time went on, little inconsistencies in his stories started to appear. One day he would mention his family living in the city, and the next he would talk about growing up in the suburbs. The details about his job also seemed to vary. Sometimes he worked at a prestigious law firm. Other times he was an executive at a tech company. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that it was just my overactive imagination getting the better of me. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, Mick's phone kept buzzing incessantly. When he stepped into the shower, I couldn't help but glance down at the device. To my horror, I saw message after message from various women, each one under the impression that they were his girlfriend. My heart sank as I pieced together the awful truth. Mick was leading on multiple women simultaneously, spinning a web of lies to keep us all fooled. I felt sick to my stomach, my mind racing with a million questions. How long had this been going on? How many other women were involved? Was anything he had told me even true? Overcome with a mixture of anger and disbelief, I confronted him as soon as he emerged from the bathroom. But instead of owning up to his deceit, Mike became enraged. He accused me of being paranoid and distrustful, flipping the blame back on me and making me feel like the one in the wrong. He insisted that the messages were from harmless acquaintances and that I was overreacting. I could see the panic in his eyes, though, as he desperately tried to downplay the severity of the situation. In that moment, I realized that his entire persona had been fabricated. The successful, charming, and emotionally available man I had fallen for was nothing more than a facade, a carefully constructed illusion designed to lure in unsuspecting women like myself. I had been played, manipulated, and used, all while believing that I had found my perfect match. The betrayal I felt was overwhelming. I had opened my heart to this man, trusted him completely, and he had shattered that trust in the most devastating way imaginable. I couldn't help but wonder how many other women had fallen victim to his lies, how many other lives he had torn apart with his selfish, despicable actions. As I gathered my things and prepared to leave, Mike tried to sweet-talk his way out of the situation, offering empty promises and hollow apologies. But I was done. I couldn't stay another minute in the presence of this manipulative, deceitful individual. I had to get as far away from him as possible to escape the web of lies he had woven around me. In the days and weeks that followed, I struggled to make sense of what had happened. I replayed the memories in my mind, searching for any clues that could have tipped me off to his true nature. But the truth was, he had been a master of deception, expertly concealing his true self behind a facade of charm and charisma. The emotional scars left by this experience ran deep. I found it difficult to trust anyone, constantly second-guessing the motives of those around me. The idea of opening myself up to another relationship filled me with a sense of dread, as I feared falling victim to the same kind of betrayal all over again. It's been years since that fateful night, and I'm still trying to come to terms with what happened. The pain and hurt may have faded, but the lessons I learned have stayed with me. I now know that not everyone is who they seem, and that the most charming and charismatic individuals can often be hiding the darkest of secrets. While I may never fully recover from the trauma of that experience, I've learned to be more cautious, more discerning, and more vigilant when it comes to matters of the heart. I've also come to understand that true love isn't about perfection or a fabricated persona, but about honesty, trust, and a willingness to be vulnerable. My encounter with Mike may have been a nightmare, but it has also made me stronger, more resilient, and more determined to find genuine, lasting love. I know that there are good, trustworthy people out there, and I'm not going to let the actions of one manipulative individual keep me from finding them. It's a journey, to be sure, but one that I'm committed to taking with a newfound wisdom and self-awareness that will guide me along the way. As I look back on that time in my life, I can't help but feel a sense of grateful in a way. While the experience was undoubtedly traumatic, it has ultimately made me a better, more discerning person. I'm more attuned to the red flags, more willing to trust my instincts, and more committed to surrounding myself with genuine, trustworthy individuals. And so, while the scars of my encounter with Mike may never fully heal, I'm grateful for the lessons it has taught me. I know now that true love is not about perfection or a fabricated persona, but about honesty, trust, and a willingness to be vulnerable. And I've determined to find that kind of love, no matter how long it takes. Because in the end, the journey is what matters most, and I'm more prepared than ever to navigate it with wisdom, resilience, and an open heart. I thought I had finally met someone who truly understood me. When I first met him, he seemed so in tune with my emotions, offering insights and advice that felt uncannily accurate. He listened intently as I shared my fears, my insecurities, and my deepest vulnerabilities. I was amazed at how he was able to pinpoint the root of my struggles and offer such compassionate guidance. In the beginning, it was a refreshing change from the superficial conversations I was used to. He didn't shy away from the messy, painful parts of my life. Instead, he dove in headfirst, validating my feelings and making me feel heard and understood in a way no one else ever had. I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else, grateful to have finally found someone who got me. As time went on, however, I started to notice that his interest in my personal struggles seemed to go beyond simple empathy. He would steer our conversations back to my vulnerabilities, almost obsessively, probing deeper and deeper, as if dissecting every layer of my psyche. What had once felt like care and concern now felt more like an unhealthy fascination. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that his intensity was just a byproduct of how deeply he cared. But the more I pulled back, the harder he seemed to push, refusing to let me change the subject. It was as if he couldn't bear the thought of not having complete access to my innermost thoughts and feelings. Looking back, I can see now how he slowly started to chip away at my sense of self, undermining my confidence and making me dependent on his validation. Anytime I expressed doubt or uncertainty, he would swoop in with reassurance, gently persuading me to see things his way. It was so subtle, so gradual, that I hardly even noticed it happening. Before long, I found myself second-guessing my own instincts, constantly seeking his approval and guidance. I became terrified of disappointing him or losing his support. He had worn his way so deeply into my psyche that I couldn't imagine navigating the world without him by my side. It wasn't until much later that I realized the true extent of his manipulation. He hadn't just been interested in helping me. He had been using my own vulnerabilities against me, slowly eroding my sense of self so that I would become utterly reliant on him. The man who had seemed so caring and empathetic was really just a master of psychological control, pulling my strings with disturbing precision. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when I finally saw the truth, but once the scales fell from my eyes, everything became painfully clear. The way he would expertly redirect our conversations, the subtle put-downs that chipped away at my self-worth, the way he would withhold affection or approval whenever I tried to assert my independence. It was all part of the calculated strategy to keep me trapped in his web of control. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had trusted this man with my deepest fears and insecurities, and he had betrayed that trust in the most insidious way possible. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had violated my mind, manipulating my very thoughts and feelings for his own twisted ends. It took me a long time to untangle myself from his influence, to rebuild the confidence and self-trust that he had so skillfully dismantled. Even now, years later, I still catch myself second-guessing my instincts or seeking his phantom approval. The scars he left behind run deep, a constant reminder of how easily the human mind can be exploited by someone with malicious intent. I share this story not as a warning, but as a cautionary tale. We like to think that we're immune to manipulation, that we'll always be able to spot the red flags. But the reality is that the most dangerous predators often cloak themselves in the very qualities we find most appealing: empathy, compassion, and a deep understanding of the human psyche. So be vigilant, my friends. Pay attention to those nagging doubts, the subtle shifts in behavior that don't quite add up. Trust your instincts even when they're telling you something you don't want to hear. Because the man who seems too good to be true just might be the one pulling the strings, using your own mind as a weapon against you. I wish I had known then what I know now. Maybe then I could have seen the warning signs before it was too late. But the truth is, we're all vulnerable to the machinations of a skilled manipulator, no matter how strong or self-aware we think we are. The only defense is to stay true to ourselves, to never let anyone chip away at our sense of self-worth or control our thoughts and feelings. It's a constant battle, but one that's worth fighting. Because the alternative, losing ourselves to someone else's twisted agenda, is simply too high a price to pay. So take heed, my friends. Keep your eyes open, your instincts sharp, and your sense of self firmly intact. If you ever find yourself in the grip of someone like him, don't be afraid to reach out, to seek help, and to reclaim your own power. Because you are worth fighting for, and no one, not even the most charming and persuasive of manipulators, has the right to take that away from you. It started out perfectly. I met him on a dating app, and we hit it off right away. When we met for our first date, he was attentive, charming, and so easy to talk to. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me and made me feel like I was the only person in the room. After that amazing first date, he started texting me constantly. He would send sweet messages first thing in the morning and last thing at night. He would check in throughout the day, telling me how much he missed me and couldn't wait to see me again. It felt nice at first to have someone fawning over me like that. When we went out again the following weekend, he showed up with flowers and a gift. A necklace, he said, reminded him of me. Over dinner, he kept going on about how special I was and how he'd never clicked with anyone the way he did with me. He talked about taking trips together and made references to the future that took me by surprise, considering we were still just getting to know each other. I have to admit, it felt good at first to be treated like I was the center of someone's world. After being single for so long, having this guy come on so strong made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't long before the constant attention started to feel smothering. He expected me to text back immediately whenever he reached out. If I didn't respond right away, he'd get worried and ask if everything was okay. He wanted to spend every free moment together and got upset if I said I had plans with friends or just wanted a night to myself. When I tried to explain that I needed a little space to keep living my own life, he became cold and distant. He accused me of not caring about him as much as he cared about me. He said if I wouldn't make more time for him, he didn't see the point in continuing the relationship. I felt guilty and found myself apologizing just to smooth things over. I made concessions I wasn't totally comfortable with, scaling back on time with my friends just to reassure him I was still interested. But the more I gave in to his demands, the more extreme they became. He started insisting on being together every single night. If I ever wanted to do my own thing, he would lay on the guilt extra thick, claiming I must not love him more I wouldn't keep rejecting his invitations. If I stood firm on maintaining any sort of boundary, he would fly into a rage, calling me selfish and accusing me of using him. He said no one had ever treated him as well as he treated me, and this was the hurtful thanks he got in return. I found myself in a loop of being love-bombed when I complied with his wishes, then emotionally punished whenever I asserted any form of independence. It finally reached a breaking point one night when I refused to blow off long-standing plans with a friend to accommodate one of his spontaneous invitations. When I turned him down, he unleashed a tirade of insults, saying some absolutely vile things before storming off. I sat there in shock, realizing for the first time how abusive and manipulative this relationship had become. Where once I felt so valued and adored, now I only felt afraid and controlled. The loving guy I thought I knew had become a stranger. A moody, possessive stranger who viewed me as a possession rather than a partner. The romance had soured into something toxic that made me walk on eggshells any time I wasn't catering to his whims. I knew that it had to end. As difficult as it was, I broke it off immediately and didn't look back, ignoring the barrage of calls and texts asking for another chance. By then I understood that his over-the-top displays of affection were never real, just hooks to keep me on the line. The experience taught me to take things slow in dating and watch for red flags. Intense early bonding isn't always as romantic as it seems. Sometimes it's a warning sign of someone trying to overwhelm you with feelings before revealing their dark side. I'm thankful I got what I did before things got worse, but I'll never forget how quickly a dreamy courtship turned into an emotional nightmare, all because I ignored subtle early clues in my desire to feel adored. Moving forward, I know to proceed with more caution, keeping both eyes open for any signs of manipulation in the guise of love. Real, lasting connections take time to build, and anyone trying to fast-track intimacy should raise some questions. My dating life has been quieter since that big burn, but also healthier. I now see that slow and steady is better than rushing into romance, no matter how convincing a suitor's declarations may be. I'm in no hurry these days to find someone new, but when I do decide to put myself back out there, I'll do so with a lot more wisdom learned the hard way. I'm less willing to let myself be guilt-tripped or manipulated into doing things I don't want to do. I've learned to stand firm on my boundaries and that it's okay to say no, even if the other person tries to make me feel like I'm hurting them by asserting my needs. Most importantly, I trust my instincts more. There were warning signs from the beginning that things were moving too fast, but I ignored them because I wanted so badly to believe I found an amazing guy. Now I know to pay attention to any niggling doubts or red flags, rather than brushing them off in the hopes they'll just go away. When I first met Adam, I thought he was perfect. He was charming, handsome, and always knew exactly what to say to make me smile. We met through mutual friends at a party and hit it off right away. After several weeks of casual dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. I was over the moon. I really thought I had met my soulmate. The first few months of our relationship were pure bliss. We spent nearly all our free time together, exploring new restaurants in the city and cuddling while watching movies. Adam was affectionate and attentive, always touching me reassuringly and looking at me adoringly. I felt so secure with him, like nothing could come between us. But as time went on, I started to notice some odd behavior. Adam never invited me to his apartment, always insisting on coming to my place instead. He avoided talking about his job, simply saying he was in business. When I asked about meeting his family or childhood friends, he changed the subject. Once, I even ran into an old coworker of his on the street. She had no idea Adam had a girlfriend. At first, I made excuses. Maybe he just valued his privacy. Maybe he had a traumatic childhood he didn't want to discuss. But deep down, I could feel something was off. There was an uneasiness in my gut that wouldn't go away, no matter how much I tried to rationalize his behavior. One night at dinner, after nearly 8 months of dating, I worked up the courage to confront Adam. I told him lovingly but directly that I wanted more openness, more sharing, more intimacy. I wanted to truly know him, imperfections and all. I asked him to let me in fully, promising I would accept every part of his past and present. Adam froze up. He averted his eyes and fidgeted with his silverware. After an excruciating silence, he finally spoke. Listen, you're great, but I'm just not built for serious relationships. I don't do attachments. My chest tightened. What do you mean? We've been dating for months. I know, he said flatly. I thought I could do this, but I can't. I don't feel things deeply. I never intended for this to get serious. I felt like I was in free fall, the ground crumbling beneath my feet. You lied to me. You made me think you loved me. I do care about you in a way, Adam said, but not like you want. Like I said, I don't attach to people. The rest of the conversation was a blur. I cried, I pleaded, I tried desperately to understand. But nothing could justify the magnitude of the betrayal. He had looked me in the eyes and professed his love, all while knowing it was ephemeral. I was just a placeholder for his own amusement, never someone to build a life with. The breakup was swift and final. As I gathered my things from his car that night, I took one last look at Adam. For a fleeting moment, his stoic mask slipped, and I thought I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. Or maybe it was just my desperate imagination, trying to justify the relationship in hindsight. I spent the next few weeks heartbroken, sobbing to my friends, scrolling endlessly through old texts from Adam, wondering what I did wrong. I questioned if I had missed earlier signs, beating myself up for not trusting my intuition. Eventually the pain receded to a dull ache, my broken heart slowly starting to mend. In the months that followed, I dove back into hobbies I had neglected when consumed by the relationship. I reconnected with old friends, no longer blowing them off to spend every free moment with Adam. I adopted a sweet rescue dog whose unconditional love brought laughter back into my home, and I started seeing a therapist to unpack lingering doubts about my self-worth. Through all this, I came to realize Adam's deception revealed more about his own emotional limitations than any failing of mine. I didn't deserve to be strung along and lied to for his own entertainment. No one does, but I had ignored red flags out of rose-colored infatuation and vowed not to make that mistake again. With time and reflection, I regained my sense of self-worth. I reminded myself that I have so much love to give. But first, I need to choose someone who can truly reciprocate, someone who embraces intimacy rather than fleeing from it. For now, I'm enjoying getting to know myself again as an independent whole person. When I'm ready, I'll put myself back out there, but I'll proceed cautiously with my eyes wide open. If any red flags appear, I'll address them right away instead of making excuses. My experience with Adam left scars, but it taught me invaluable lessons. I now know the signs of real connection versus artificial charm. I recognize my worth and won't accept less than I deserve. I trust my gut instincts again, rather than suppressing doubts. Though dating comes with risks, I can protect myself by staying grounded in self-love. With courage and discernment, my heart will remain open, just a bit more guarded. What Adam did was unforgivable, but life is too short to remain bitter. In time, I genuinely hope he seeks help and reflects on how his actions hurt people. For now, I'm moving forward on my journey, stronger and wiser. There will be ups and downs, but I will follow my truth, and someday the right person will meet me there. I can't believe I'm sitting here writing this. Looking back, I'm not sure how I got into this mess. Everything seemed so perfect at first. When I met him, I was immediately drawn in by his charming smile and kind demeanor. He was the perfect gentleman, opening doors for me, complimenting my appearance, and always making sure I felt comfortable. We had so much in common, and the conversation flowed so easily. I thought I had really found someone special. As we continued dating, though, I started to notice little things that didn't sit quite right with me. He would insist on coming over, even when I was tired from a long day at work. He would show up unexpectedly at events I was attending, saying he just happened to be in the area. At first, I tried to brush it off, figuring he was just being spontaneous and eager to spend time together. But then the pressure started. He would push me to do things I wasn't ready for, going further physically, meeting his friends and family, making big plans for the future. When I would hesitate or say I wasn't comfortable, he would laugh it off, telling me I was too sensitive or that I needed to loosen up. I felt like I was constantly having to justify my boundaries and decisions to him. The worst part was I started to question myself. Was I overreacting? Was I just being difficult? He made me feel like my discomfort was a problem, not his refusal to respect it. Gradually, I found myself giving in little by little just to keep the peace. I didn't want to rock the boat or lose him. Looking back, I can see so clearly now how he was systematically wearing down my boundaries, testing the limits of what he could get away with. It was a slow, insidious process, and by the time I realized what was happening, I felt trapped. I was constantly walking on eggshells, terrified of upsetting him or triggering another round of pressure and dismissal. The final straw came when he showed up at my apartment one night, even though I had explicitly told him I needed some space. When I refused to let him in, he got angry, accused me of being ungrateful, and leading him on. That's when I knew I had to get out. I can't pinpoint the exact moment I lost myself in all of this. It happened so gradually, with him chipping away at my sense of self and my right to say no. I became consumed with trying to anticipate his needs and manage his moods, constantly second-guessing my own instincts. It was emotionally exhausting, and I started to lose touch with who I truly was. Thankfully, I found the strength to walk away. It wasn't easy. He begged and pleaded, telling me that I was overreacting and that he couldn't live without me. But I refused to let him manipulate me any longer. I had to prioritize my own well-being and safety. Now that I'm on the other side of it, I can see how toxic and unhealthy that relationship was. He never respected me as an equal partner. He just saw me as an object to possess and control. I'm grateful I had the courage to end it before it completely consumed me. It's been a long road to recovery, but I'm slowly rebuilding my sense of self and learning to trust my instincts again. I'll never ignore those low red flags the way I did before. Anytime someone tries to push my boundaries or make me question my right to say no, I know it's time to walk away. My experience has taught me that true respect and care in a relationship isn't about compromise or giving in. It's about both people honoring each other's needs and boundaries with compassion and understanding. I'll never settle for anything less than that again. I've had to do a lot of self-reflection and healing. It wasn't easy to confront the ways I had allowed my boundaries to be eroded. I had to accept that I had played a role in enabling his controlling behavior, even if I didn't realize it at the time. That realization was incredibly difficult, but it was also an important step in reclaiming my power. One of the hardest parts has been rebuilding my confidence and trusting my own judgment again. For so long, I had allowed him to make me question my intuition and my right to say no. I had to relearn how to listen to that inner voice and honor my needs, even if it meant disappointing someone else. It's been a slow process, but I'm getting better at it every day. Therapy has been an immense help in my recovery. Having a professional to talk to, who could validate my experiences and help me unpack the dynamics of the relationship, has been invaluable. I've also leaned heavily on my support system of family and friends, who have been patient and understanding as I've navigated this journey. Slowly but surely, I'm regaining a sense of who I am outside of that toxic dynamic. I'm rediscovering my passions and interests and making time for the activities and people that bring me joy. It's been empowering to reclaim my life and my autonomy.
I met him at a party through mutual friends. He was charming, handsome, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We hit it off right away and ended up talking for hours. At the end of the night, he asked for my number. I happily gave it to him, excited at the prospect of seeing where things could go. Over the next several weeks, we started spending more and more time together. We would meet up for dinner and movies, take long walks just talking, and even have quiet nights and just cuddling on the couch. I felt myself falling for him hard and fast. One night, after a particularly romantic date, I worked up the courage to ask him where he saw this going. He looked surprised and immediately said he wasn't looking for anything serious. He told me not to get ahead of myself, that we were just friends enjoying our time together. I was confused and hurt, but decided not to push the issue. I still wanted to spend time with him and didn't want to scare him off. So we continued dating, acting like a real couple in every way. He would hold my hand in public, introduce me as his girl to his friends, and get visibly irritated if I so much as mentioned another guy's name. His actions were that of a boyfriend, but every time I tried to define the relationship, he insisted we were just casual. The longer this went on, the more anxious and insecure I became. I analyzed his every word and action, searching for hidden meaning. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was imagining this connection between us. My friends kept telling me they saw the sparks and real chemistry between us. But when I confronted him, he made me feel silly for even suggesting we could be more. After months of this emotional roller coaster, I was a mess. I was constantly on edge, oscillating between hope and hurt on a daily basis. I was obsessed with making this man I cared so deeply for finally commit to me. I just wanted clarity one way or the other. Eventually, I realized he was never going to give me what I wanted. He enjoyed the ego boost of my attention and affection, but did not want the responsibility of an actual relationship with me. I was devastated to accept that he had been using me all this time. Looking back, I am horrified at how long I debased myself, chasing after his crumbs of affection and false promises. I am still stinging from the humiliation and heartbreak of letting this man play with my emotions for so long. But I am slowly rebuilding my confidence, reminding myself that I deserve someone who proudly commits to being with me. My friends have been so supportive, reassuring me that this says nothing about my worth or lovability. While I wouldn't wish this mind game dating experience on anyone, I am grateful for the lessons it taught me. I will never again ignore red flags or compromise my standards just to be with someone. I know now that real love does not keep one partner dangling on a string, unsure of where they stand. When the right man comes along, he will choose me without hesitation or games. This harrowing chapter ultimately prepared me to spot and avoid other users. It reminded me to save my love and energy for someone ready to give that back unconditionally. Though still healing, I emerge wiser and stronger thanks to the heartache that came from almost losing myself in pursuit of an unavailable man. Looking back with more clarity, I can now see all the signs I overlooked. The way he avoided defining our relationship status. How he conveniently forgot plans we had made together. The times I caught him blatantly flirting with other women in front of me. All the last-minute cancellations whenever things started feeling too couple-y. I made so many excuses for him, willfully ignoring behavior that should have been deal-breakers. My self-esteem had slowly been chipped away by his inability to commit. I internalized each pulled-away handhold, every recoil when I said, "I love you," all the friends and family functions I attended alone, though we were supposedly together. It all led me to question if I was worthy of love at all. And yet I clung to every breadcrumb of affection, fearful that even those would disappear if I asked for too much. Looking back now, I am appalled at how much power I relinquished over my own heart and happiness. I lost myself in this push-pull dynamic, molding my life around a man unwilling to make space for me in his. No relationship is worth that sacrifice of self. It shames me to admit how long I hung on, convincing myself each time that this would be the moment he finally saw the light and gave us a real chance. When the relationship finally ran its dysfunctional course, the grief I felt surprised me in its intensity. I was mourning not just the loss of him, but the loss of what I thought we had and could have become. With distance and time away, it became clear that relationship only existed in my head. I had fallen in love with potential, willfully ignorant to all the signs of his disinterest and emotional unavailability. Heartbreak is always painful, but losing someone who was never really yours to begin with aches in a deeper, more humiliating way. But I am done questioning my worth based on how others treat me. His inability to appreciate the profound love I offered says much more about him than me. This experience, while scaring, taught me that I deserve someone who chooses me, not settles for me. Who proudly commits, not keeps me guessing. Who offers the unconditional love I so freely give, not breadcrumbs and excuses. While the road to rebuilding my confidence and trust has been challenging, I am getting there. This painful chapter will not define me, only strengthen and prepare me for the right partner. I enter the dating world once more a little warier, a little wiser, a little less inclined to ignore red flags. I am focused on listening to my intuition and upholding my standards. Most importantly, I will never again convince myself to accept crumbs when what I want is the whole cake. My appetite for real reciprocal love is back, and I am willing to wait as long as it takes to satisfy it. I still remember the day I met him so clearly. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and I was grabbing coffee with a friend at my favorite cafe. He caught my eye as soon as he walked in, tall, handsome, impeccably dressed. When our eyes met, he smiled, and I felt my heart skip a beat. After chatting with my friend for a bit, I went up to the counter to order a refill. He was standing there and struck up a conversation with me. We immediately hit it off. He was charming, polite, and funny. He seemed genuinely interested in learning all about me. We ended up talking for over an hour. When he asked for my number, I readily gave it to him, thrilled at the prospect of seeing him again. Our first date was absolutely perfect. He brought me flowers and took me to a fancy restaurant I'd been wanting to try. The conversation flowed easily, and he was such an attentive listener. At the end of the night, he gave me a gentle kiss on the cheek. I practically floated home, giddy with excitement about this new relationship. Things continued to go well for the first few months. He would plan these elaborate dates: picnic in the park, home-cooked candlelit dinners, couples massages. He was always doing thoughtful little things like bringing me coffee or surprises like concert tickets to my favorite band. I really felt cared for and special. But then gradually, subtle changes started happening. At first, they were easy to brush off. A comment here or there about how short my skirt was or how he wished I didn't go out with my friends so often. I tried not to read too much into it at the time. However, his controlling tendencies became more obvious as time went on. He would get clearly upset if I was ever busy when he wanted to see me. The guilt tripping began, saying things like, "If you really cared about me, you'd make more time." If I ever disagreed with him or tried to do something without him, he'd give me the silent treatment for days, not returning my calls or texts. It was frustrating because he never did anything crazy obvious. He still continued to shower me with affection and gifts, so it was easy to get swept up in the romance of it all. But there was this underlying feeling that something wasn't quite right. I felt anxious any time we were apart, worried about upsetting him. I stopped making as many plans with friends or family, using the excuse that I was busy with my new relationship. The control and manipulation only increased with time. He started making little remarks about my appearance, suggesting I wear this dress instead of that one, or that I looked better with straight hair rather than curly. I started spending more and more time at his place instead of my own, and he'd get upset if I ever wanted to go back to my apartment. One night, after I got back from having dinner with a girlfriend, he absolutely lost it on me. He accused me of being selfish, inconsiderate, and trying to make him jealous. I was stunned and tried to calmly explain that it was just a friendly dinner. But he didn't want to hear it. He told me if I kept behaving like this, I'd leave him no choice but to break up with me. I ended up apologizing just to smooth things over, even though I knew deep down I'd done nothing wrong. That was a turning point for me. I realized just how controlling he'd become and how much he'd isolated me from the rest of my life. I was like a puppet, changing my behavior to please him and avoid angering him. The caring, charming man I first met now felt like a distant memory. Looking back, I can recognize the manipulation and warning signs much more clearly. But in the moment, it occurred so gradually that it was hard to grasp just how unhealthy our dynamic had become. After that blow-up about my girls' night, I knew I had to get out. As soon as he left for a work trip, I packed up my stuff from his place. The next time I saw him, I ended the relationship for good. Of course, he tried to convince me otherwise with more gifts and apologies, but I stood firm. It's been a few months now, and I'm slowly starting to feel like myself again. My friends have been so supportive, and I know over time I'll regain my full independence. I'm grateful I got out when I did before things got even worse. but I'll certainly be much more cautious about letting someone have that kind of control over me again. This man swept me off my feet only to slowly and subtly tear away at my spirit. I let myself get caught up in fantasy without acknowledging the red flags. It was a difficult lesson to learn, but one that will stick with me as I continue to heal and move forward. Looking back with some distance, I can see all the ways he manipulated me so clearly. It makes me sad to think about how much I lost myself in that relationship. I used to be so strong and confident before I met him. I had my own interests, friends, and hobbies that slowly fell away as he consumed more and more of my time and attention. My closest girlfriends tried to point out some of his controlling behaviors to me, but I brushed them off, so caught up in how romantic he seemed on the surface. I truly believed everything he did was out of love and care in the beginning. But real love shouldn't make you feel anxious, isolated, and constantly seeking approval. I'm trying not to be too hard on myself when thinking about all the signs I overlooked or excuses I made for him. Abusers can be incredibly manipulative and make you feel like their behavior is normal. But I know now that constant guilt-tripping, isolation, possessiveness, and controlling tendencies are huge red flags, no matter how charming the person seems at first. My friends were such a blessing when I finally left him. They swooped in and helped me move all my belongings out of his place in record time. They didn't judge me for staying as long as I did or blame me for letting him get away with so much. They just listened and reminded me how strong I was. I don't know if I could have gotten through those first few weeks without them. It's taken time, but I'm getting back to doing things I love again. Yoga classes, game nights, trips to the museum. Activities that make me feel like me. I'd lost touch with so many parts of myself when my entire life became about him. But now, I feel like I'm finally getting back on track, focusing on my own growth. When I first met her at that party, I thought she was the most charming woman I'd ever come across. She seemed so interested in me as a person, laughing at my jokes and asking thoughtful questions about my job and hobbies. I was smitten right away. We started dating, and she continued to impress me with how caring and attentive she was. She'd text me cute little updates through the day and have my favorite coffee order memorized for our dates. I felt like the luckiest guy alive to have found such an incredible woman. A few weeks in, she mentioned how slammed she was with bills that month and asked if I could cover dinner. I was happy to help out someone I cared about and figured it was just a one-time favor. But then the requests kept coming. She needed gas money to get to work. She was short on rent. She had a perfect outfit for a wedding we were attending but couldn't afford it. I tried to oblige, but it was getting excessive. When I brought up how frequently she was asking for financial help, she got emotional and said she was just going through a rough patch. She made me feel guilty, like I was failing as her supportive partner. So I kept paying, even as it started seriously draining my own accounts. The requests escalated over the following months. She wanted me to pay for a weekend getaway, new tires for her car, her phone bill. It felt endless, no matter how much I gave her. If I hesitated at all, she'd get dramatic and claim I must not care about her well-being. I started questioning if this is what relationships are supposed to be like. By about 6 months together, it was clear she had no intentions of paying me back for anything. Trips, gifts, bills, it all came out of my pocket while she spent frivolously. I finally put my foot down one day when she asked me to co-sign an expensive lease on a new luxury car. I told her plainly that I couldn't keep financially supporting her like this. She blew up at me, saying what kind of man doesn't provide for his woman? That all her exes had taken good care of her, and if I really loved her, I would too. I started to realize then that she'd been using me for my money all this time. I felt so stupid looking back at all the signs I had ignored. The non-stop requests for money starting early in our relationship. How she always managed to deflect or make me feel guilty whenever I objected. The over-the-top displays of affection when I agreed to pay for something big. In hindsight, it was obvious she had targeted me as a naive romantic who would give endlessly to someone he thought cared about him. But the truth was she never cared about me, just what I could provide for her. I was too blinded by my feelings to see I was being used. Breaking things off was hard. She refused to accept it was over. She alternated between desperately pleading for me to keep supporting her and hurling vicious insults when I stood firm. I questioned if I was making the right choice. But deep down, I knew this relationship had become toxic. She would financially and emotionally drain me for as long as I allowed it. I had to rip off the Band-Aid, as painful as it was in the moment. In the months after, I recovered both emotionally and financially. I regained my sense of self-worth after being manipulated for so long. My accounts stabilized without constant withdrawals. And I learned important lessons about spotting red flags early and setting clear boundaries in a relationship. I won't ignore those instincts again if I seem to be getting taken advantage of. This experience, as terrible as it felt at the time, ended up making me stronger and wiser for future relationships. I emerged with a clear sense of what real love should be: mutual caring, respect, and support. Never again will I let someone use me for their own gain. I know now my generosity should be reserved for those who genuinely appreciate me. Looking back, there were a few early signs that I can now see should have been red flags. On our first date, she forgot her wallet and asked if I could cover the meal. At the time, I thought she was just a little scatterbrained. Another time, she had me pick up a prescription for her on the way to her place that she didn't have time to get herself. I thought I was just being helpful, but I now know it was a test to see what she could get me to do. Within the first couple weeks, she pointed out some pricey shoes she loved, but said she couldn't justify spending that much right now. Of course, I'd immediately offered to buy them as a gift. She leaped at the chance, her first successful bid to take advantage of my generosity. Looking back on it all, I can pick out dozens of instances like this where she was clearly setting the stage to financially use me. But at the time, I was too enamored to recognize the calculated actions for what they were. I've learned now to be wary when a new partner seems to be gauging what favors they can get from me. I watch for those tests to see how much I'm willing to give or do for them. And I don't ignore my instincts when something seems off. Had I paid closer attention early on, I may have noticed she only showed interest when I was buying her gifts or paying for dates. The affection stopped if I didn't provide something material. These should have all been signs she was just using me before it went too far. But I let my emotions override my common sense. Never again will I give endlessly to someone who only shows me attention when I'm doing something for them. I've learned to watch for reciprocity in a healthy relationship. If I'm not getting the same energy back, it's time to reevaluate. And if my generosity isn't appreciated sincerely, I'll find someone who values me rather than my wallet. This experience shook me at the time, but ultimately gave me the discernment I needed in dating. I now trust my instincts when something seems off instead of making excuses. And I save my care and financial support only for those who deserve it, not manipulative users looking for a free ride. As painful as it was, I'm grateful to have gone through it. I emerged wiser and stronger, with my self-respect intact. I thought I had found the one. When I first met Sarah, she seemed like the perfect partner, kind, attentive, and always there for me. We had an instant connection, and I fell for her quickly. The early days of our relationship were a whirlwind of romance, with her showering me with affection and support. She was always checking in, making sure I was okay, and telling me how much I meant to her. I felt so special and lucky to have found someone who cared about me so deeply. But as time went on, I started to notice some concerning behaviors. Sarah would constantly ask who I was spending time with, even if I was just grabbing coffee with a coworker. She would find ways to discreetly look through my phone when I wasn't paying attention, and then get upset if she saw I had been messaging female friends. I tried to reassure her that she was the only one for me, but it never seemed to be enough. The social media monitoring got out of hand too. Sarah would scroll through my Instagram and Facebook, analyzing every interaction I had with other women. If I so much as liked a post or left a comment, she would grill me about it later, accusing me of flirting or trying to hook up with them. I felt like I had to censor myself, terrified of upsetting her. The jealousy and control just kept escalating. She would randomly show up at my workplace or call me multiple times a day, just to check where I was and what I was doing. If I was running late or didn't answer right away, she would work herself into a frenzy, convinced I was cheating. I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells, afraid to do anything that might trigger another outburst. Looking back, I can see now how unhealthy and toxic the relationship had become. But in the moment, I was so blinded by my love for Sarah and my desire to make things work. I kept trying to rationalize her behavior, telling myself that her insecurities were just a temporary phase, and that if I was patient and reassuring enough, she would eventually calm down. But that never happened. If anything, it just got worse over time. The final straw came when Sarah showed up at my apartment, unannounced one night, hysterical because she had seen a Snapchat story of me grabbing dinner with a female coworker. She barged in, yelling and accusing me of lying to her. When I tried to explain the situation calmly, she became physically aggressive, shoving me and breaking several of my belongings in her fit of rage. I was so scared and overwhelmed, I knew I had to get out of there. I ended the relationship that night. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I knew I couldn't keep living like that, under constant scrutiny and fear. Sarah begged me to reconsider, promising she would get help and change. But I had seen the ugly side of her too many times, and I couldn't trust that she would ever be able to overcome her all-consuming jealousy and need for control. The aftermath was messy and draining. Sarah refused to accept the breakup, bombarding me with calls, texts, and even showing up at my work. She would alternate between apologizing profusely and then lashing out, blaming me for abandoning her. It was emotionally exhausting, and I had to involve the authorities to get her to leave me alone. Even now, months later, the experience has left its mark. I'm wary of getting too close to anyone, terrified of ending up in another toxic situation. The trust issues and lingering feelings of anxiety and fear are something I'm still working through. But I know I made the right decision, even if it was an incredibly painful one at the time. My mental health and well-being had to come first. I share my story not for sympathy, but as a cautionary tale. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and understanding, not control and jealousy. If you ever find yourself in a situation like mine, where your partner's insecurities are manifesting in increasingly disturbing ways, don't hesitate to remove yourself from that environment, no matter how difficult it may seem. Your safety and sanity are worth so much more. Looking back now, I can see all the early red flags I tried to ignore. The constant texting to check up on me, the subtle put-downs about my friends or interests she didn't approve of, the way she seemed to isolate me from people and activities she saw as a threat. At the time, I rationalized it all away, believing her when she said she was just showing how much she cared. But her caring was rooted in obsession and fear of abandonment. I remember one weekend early in our relationship when I told Sarah I was going on a short hiking trip with a couple buddies. She initially seemed supportive and told me to have fun. But once I was out on the trail, my phone blew up with missed calls and panicked text from her, asking why I wasn't answering and telling me she was worried something terrible had happened. I tried to calmly reassure her, but she remained convinced I was in a ditch somewhere injured, rather than simply having no cell service. For the rest of the trip, she kept calling, distraught that I had abandoned her for my friends. When I got home, instead of being relieved I was okay, she was angry that I had made her worry. She used that whole incident as justification for why she needed to keep closer tabs on me moving forward. There were so many examples like that, where she disguised her controlling behavior as caring concern. And I was naive enough to believe it, not wanting to admit how messed up the whole situation was. Only in retrospect can I see that her insecurities were not rooted in love, but in a warped desire to possess and isolate me. Leaving her for good was not easy. The mind games and manipulation had taken a toll. Of course she didn't make it easy. For weeks after, my phone buzzed endlessly with her attempts to contact me. She even showed up at my apartment a few times, trying to convince me face to face that she had changed and we could make it work. But I held firm, finally seeing through the false promises designed to lure me back under her control. Blocking her number and across all social media was the only way to get space from the harassment. Even then, she still found ways to wedge herself back into my life from time to time in those first few months, contacting my employer, spreading lies about me to friends we had in common, anything she could do to punish me for leaving. It was our 7th year together. We had met in university and been inseparable since then. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back now, I realized there were signs it wasn't meant to be, but love makes you overlook flaws and incompatibilities. I was always the romantic one in the relationship. I loved doing little things to make him feel special. Baking his favorite treats, writing sweet notes, planning fun date nights. He never reciprocated, though. I don't think he was intentionally hurtful. Romance just didn't come naturally to him. After graduation, we decided to get an apartment together. It seemed like the natural next step after so many years as a couple. I was thrilled and started looking for the perfect place for us right away. He was hesitant, though, and kept delaying actually signing a lease. There was always some reason. He wasn't ready. He might get transferred for work. The timing wasn't right. I tried to be patient and understanding, but deep down I was hurt he wasn't as eager as me. One weekend, I went to visit a friend out of town. I left him a key so he could stay at my studio apartment while I was gone. When I came back, I was horrified to find my home trashed. Empty beer cans and pizza boxes littered the floor, sheets were torn off the bed, and drawers were rummaged through haphazardly. It looked like a frat party had raged all weekend. Even worse, my landlord texted me asking what was going on because of noise complaints. When I confronted him, all he said was womp womp. No apology or remorse. That was a huge wake-up call, but still I stayed. I hoped if I just communicated more, he would understand how hurt I was. I wanted so badly to make it work after investing 7 years together. So I tried talking to him, explaining that I felt unappreciated and taken for granted. I asked him to work on being more considerate and romantic. He would nod and agree in the moment, but his behavior never changed. As a last-ditch effort, I planned a romantic trip for us to Paris. I thought getting away, immersing ourselves in the most romantic city in the world, might rekindle the magic. I pictured strolling hand in hand along the Seine, kissing under the Eiffel Tower, cuddling in cafes. The trip was a disaster. He complained about the food, got lost on the metro, and went to bed early every night. Not once did he hold my hand, wrap his arm around me, or give me a kiss. No amount of romantic ambience could spark something that just wasn't there. I cried myself to sleep every night we were there. When I pictured my future, I saw endless years of feeling unloved and unsupported. I finally accepted we wanted different things. I was tired of trying to force a relationship with someone who didn't appreciate me. I deserved to feel cherished and desired. When we got back, I gathered my courage and ended things. He seemed shocked, as if my unhappiness was news to him. He cried and begged me to reconsider, vowing he would be more attentive. But how could I believe that when he had so many chances already? His promises were too little, too late. Leaving him was the hardest thing I've ever done. We had been intertwined for so long, I couldn't imagine life without him. But once the pain of breaking up faded, I realized I had done the right thing. I was happier alone than unfulfilled with him. I rediscovered passions I had lost and made new friends. They say hindsight is 20/20ths. Looking back now, I can clearly see all the red flags I missed. The lack of care for my feelings about moving in together, trashing my apartment with no remorse, putting no effort into our relationship. I don't blame my younger self though. When you love someone deeply, it's easy to make excuses or hope they will change. I'm thankful for the lesson this relationship taught me. Now I know what I truly want and deserve. A partner who makes me feel loved every single day through both words and actions. Someone who embraces romance and goes out of their way to make me feel special. I won't ignore the warning signs and settle for less ever again. Heartbreak was difficult, but it led me to a brighter future. I now know my worth and won't accept anything less than the love I desire. Though painful at the time, I'm grateful for the growth that experience nurtured. It took time to heal and regain my sense of self. For months after the breakup, his presence lingered everywhere, from the coffee mug he always used to the favorite show we watched together every week. Small reminders kept reopening the wound. But gradually, I reclaimed those spaces and rituals for myself. I threw myself into nurturing new hobbies, friendships, and experiences that were just mine. Slowly but surely, I rediscovered my own identity. Dating again after so long was scary. I went on some disastrous first dates, like the arrogant guy who name-dropped celebrities nonstop, and the one who tried to hold my hand as soon as we sat down. Many nights I came home vowing to give up altogether. But I kept trying, and eventually met someone truly wonderful. From our very first date, Nate was thoughtful and romantic. He brought me flowers, asked questions about my life, and really listened. He never makes me wonder how he feels about me. He tells me and shows me in so many heartfelt ways every day. When I'm with him, I feel like the most beautiful, interesting, cherished woman in the world. With Nate, everything just feels easy in a way it never did before. We laugh together constantly and have so much fun, even just running mundane errands. We share the same values and vision for our future. Though it's still the early days, I can picture growing old with him in a way I never could with my ex. They say you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince. Well, I certainly kissed a toad for many years. Looking back, I'm almost thankful for that relationship from my early 20s. It taught me so much about what I need from a partner, and shaped me into someone who knows my self-worth. I can spot red flags now and would never settle again. Though the road here had bumps, I'm so grateful it led me to Nate. I finally found the man and the love I always dreamed of. I met her about a year ago on a dating app, and at first, she seemed like the perfect partner. Caring, thoughtful, and always eager to lend a helping hand. Our first few dates went wonderfully, and I was captivated by her charm and willingness to support me. She'd laugh at my jokes, ask thoughtful questions about my interests, and seemed genuinely invested in getting to know the real me. I thought I had hit the jackpot in the dating world. Things progressed quickly, and soon we were officially a couple. I was over the moon. I had found someone who finally appreciated me for me. The first few months of our relationship were pure bliss. We'd cook dinners together, go on weekend trips, and spend hours lost in conversation. She'd send me sweet texts during the day, cheering me on at work or telling me how much she cared. I started picturing a real future together. However, looking back now, I realized the initial perfection was just part of the act. It's clear to me that she seduced me with her charm in order to make me dependent on her validation. As soon as she had secured my affections, her tactics became more insidious. The subtle criticism started innocently enough. She'd make small suggestions, like asking if I'd ever considered a different hairstyle or recommending a book that could help my career. I took it as caring advice, not realizing she was assessing my weak spots. But over time, The helpful comments became more frequent and pointed. She critiqued everything from my music taste to my fitness regimen to my goals for the future. Any time I made a decision, she had a backhanded remark ready about how I could improve it. I tried brushing it off at first, making excuses for her behavior. She just wanted what was best for me, I told myself. But deep down, I could feel my confidence waning every time she offhandedly cut me down. I started relying on her validation, desperately seeking her approval before making any choice. I was terrified of eliciting her criticism or disappointment. She claimed she was trying to fix the parts of me that were lacking. In reality, she was methodically breaking me down. She capitalized on every insecurity, making me feel inadequate unless I conformed to her standards. When I confronted her, she accused me of being resistant to change. By that point, I doubted myself so much I thought maybe she was right. The worst part was when I'd accomplished something genuinely good in my life. A promotion, a personal goal met, a positive review on my work, and she'd compliment me in a way that still felt like a slap. She'd say, "I knew you could do it if you really tried," or "See, you just needed to apply yourself." Any achievement was still ultimately attributed to her influence, not my own merits. Over time, I found myself losing all sense of identity, warped by her manipulation. I stopped trusting my own judgment. She had me convinced I'd be lost without her guidance. It took hitting rock bottom before I finally realized she had systematically stripped me of belief in myself. Everything was about feeding her ego by keeping me dependent on her approval. I'm still struggling to undo the damage she inflicted on my self-worth. Some days I wake up and hear her voice in my head, critiquing my appearance or choices. It's a constant battle to retrain my brain after so much conditioning. I know now that I was perfect all along. She simply chipped away at me to serve herself. It will be a long road to rebuild what she broke, but I am determined to regain my confidence and sense of self again. Though the experience left scars, it taught me valuable lessons. I will never ignore red flags again or relinquish my identity for someone else's ego. My worth is not defined by another person's metrics. I deserve to be appreciated fully for who I am. Most importantly, I will trust myself, for I am enough. Looking back, there were early signs of her controlling nature that I overlooked. On our first date, she made an offhand joke about my taste in music being a little immature. At the time, I'd brushed it off as playful banter, but it was a small test to see how I'd react to criticism. When we made plans with other friends, she'd subtly steer the conversation to highlight aspects of my life she wanted to portray as flaws. She'd say things like, "Oh, he's always been disorganized, ever since I've known him." Or, "He's getting better about being on time, but you know how he is." She played it off like she was joking, but it was calculated to chip away at me. Once we became official, she pushed to integrate our lives at warp speed. She insisted I give her a key to my apartment after only a month of dating. She wanted to meet my family right away and kept asking when I'd bring her home. Everything moved incredibly fast, which I realize now was a means of gaining control. I also see now that she isolated me from people and activities she saw as threatening. When I mentioned getting drinks with an old friend, she'd make passive-aggressive comments until I canceled the plans. She gradually convinced me it was easier to just spend time with her. She was my whole world, which was exactly what she wanted. The whole relationship was designed to warp my reality. She had me so mind-fucked I couldn't even recognize the abuse. Only after getting distance from her influence did I realize the systematic way she manipulated my emotions. She preyed on every doubt and insecurity, sharpening them like blades to use against me. The scariest part is how good she was at hiding her true nature when she wanted to. In public, she'd brag about me and build me up to everyone. But as soon as we were alone, she'd undermine and criticize. It was textbook covert narcissism, leaving me convinced I was the problem, not her. I know now that true love should empower you, not make you feel powerless. People who genuinely care build you up. They don't tear you down through subtle denigration. I hope my experience can help others recognize manipulation disguised as caring. The red flags are there if you know what to look for. Ultimately, I take responsibility for ignoring the signs and allowing someone else to determine my worth. I will never make that mistake again. My eyes are open now. I am healing, learning, and regaining my sense of self one day at a time. She did not break me, for my spirit and truth remain intact. I am enough. When I first met Amy, I was drawn in by her passionate, exciting personality. After a string of lackluster relationships, her fiery spirit was a breath of fresh air. On our first date, the conversation flowed effortlessly for hours. I left feeling more alive than I had in years. In the beginning, Amy was affectionate and attentive, always going out of her way to plan romantic activities for us. She'd surprise me with thoughtful little gifts and write me sweet notes expressing how happy I made her. I started falling for her hard. But it wasn't long before Amy's moods became unpredictable. One day she would be loving, the next cold, and withdrawn for reasons I couldn't understand. Minor issues would set off huge fights that left me baffled and emotionally drained. Her temper was frightening when provoked. After her outbursts, Amy would become apologetic and distraught, desperately trying to make amends with extravagant gestures. A bouquet of roses, an impromptu weekend getaway, promises to change. She would pull out all the stops until I forgave her. I tried to be understanding, but the turbulence was taking its toll. I realized Amy thrived on the drama of our relationship. She seemed addicted to the highs and lows, intentionally creating chaos only to enjoy reconciling later. I dreaded confrontation, while Amy came alive during conflict. She picked fights over insignificant things, then cried and pleaded for me to end the pain she had caused. Her behavior became increasingly erratic. She would accuse me of not caring one day and smother me with affection the next. These emotional extremes kept me in a constant state of unease, never knowing what would set her off. I found myself walking on eggshells, careful not to mention any subject that could be misconstrued. Amy's jealousy was also growing out of control. If I went out with friends, she would blow up my phone, certain I was up to no good. When I didn't respond quickly enough, she'd show up unannounced to check on me. She monitored my social media accounts obsessively and interrogated me about every female friend or coworker. I tried talking to Amy, pleading with her to get help managing her emotions. She would vow to change, seeing how her actions were damaging our relationship. But nothing ever changed. We continued the exhausting cycle of fights, tearful apologies, and honeymoons until the next blow-up. The anxiety of dealing with Amy's unpredictability was manifesting physically. I wasn't sleeping or eating well, dropping weight, and feeling drained. My work performance suffered as I became less able to concentrate. I withdrew from friends and family, afraid they would judge me for staying with Amy. I felt like I was losing myself. The final straw came unexpectedly on my birthday. I arrived home from work to find Amy had thrown me a surprise party, filling my apartment with flowers and twinkling lights. I blinked back grateful tears, thinking maybe she had turned a corner. But when I gave Amy a simple thank you kiss, she accused me of being distant and no longer loving her. The evening devolved into Amy loudly berating me at my own party as stunned friends looked on. I realized then that her actions had nothing to do with me. She simply needed chaos, even if it destroyed us. I asked Amy to leave, ignoring her sobs and apologies. After she left, I knew I had to end the relationship for my own well-being. Her toxicity had taken an immense toll. It took time to recover and rebuild relationships I had neglected. I was warier when dating again, not wanting to repeat past mistakes. Looking back, I wish I had recognized the red flags sooner instead of being seduced by passion. Some storms aren't worth weathering, no matter how alluring the eye of the hurricane seems at first. Leaving the turbulence behind brought the calm I had been missing. In the months after the breakup, I learned Amy had a pattern of unstable relationships. She would idealize new partners, only to systematically chip away at their self-worth once the infatuation faded. I wasn't her first victim, just the latest casualty in her destructive cycle. I was ashamed I had stuck around so long, allowing her abuse to escalate for years. My friends had voiced concerns early on about her controlling, erratic behavior. But I had brushed them off, convinced she would get better if I just loved her enough. I now know abusers don't change without serious professional intervention, which Amy always refused. The experience left me with a lingering distrust of my own judgment. If I missed the signs with Amy, how could I trust myself to pick healthy partners going forward? I found myself overanalyzing new dates, looking for red flags, a lived-in look the first time visiting their place, a flash of anger at a waitress, pressed intrusive questions about my past. One relationship ended after only 3 dates when the guy casually mentioned wanting to start a family soon. I panicked, imagining him turning possessive and trapping me the way Amy had. It was unfair, but my ability to give someone the benefit of the doubt had been eroded. To move forward, I knew I needed help rebuilding my self-worth that Amy had slowly chipped away. Therapy empowered me to set firmer boundaries and advocate for my needs. I joined a support group that helped me see Amy's treatment was about her issues, not my worthiness of love. Gradually, I made peace with the fact that a healthy relationship can't be rushed or forced. When the timing in person is right, it will develop organically at its own pace. Love shouldn't feel like a roller coaster. It takes work, but of the rewarding kind that leaves both partners better, not battered. While the scars remain, I'm stronger now. I can enjoy dating's ups and downs, knowing I deserve someone who brings out the best in me, not the worst. Amy was a hard lesson, but one that helped me learn to value myself. I'm ready to welcome a love built on mutual trust, not toxicity. In the beginning, he seemed like the perfect partner. Charming, attentive, and always ready to listen. I was immediately drawn to his warm smile and the way he made me feel seen and heard. We had an instant connection, and I couldn't help but feel lucky to have found someone so seemingly considerate and understanding. As our relationship progressed, however, I started to notice a pattern emerging. Whenever he shared stories about his past, he always cast himself as the victim. His ex-girlfriends were crazy, and his coworkers were out to get him. It was never his fault. Life was just unfair to him. At first, I felt sympathetic. I thought, poor guy, he's been through so much. I tried to be a supportive partner, offering a listening ear and words of encouragement. But as time went on, I realized that he never took responsibility for anything. Every argument or disagreement was my fault, and he constantly made me feel guilty for things that weren't even my responsibility. It was like walking on eggshells around him. I found myself constantly second-guessing my actions, afraid of triggering another outburst or round of blame shifting. He had a knack for turning the tables, making me feel like the unreasonable one, even when I knew I was right. The more I observed his behavior, the more I began to understand that his victim mentality was a way to manipulate and avoid accountability. Whenever I tried to address an issue or express my own feelings, he would immediately deflect and make it about how he was the one being wronged. It was exhausting, and it slowly eroded my sense of self-worth. I started to doubt my own perceptions and judgments, constantly wondering if I was the one being irrational or unfair. The relationship that had once felt so promising had become a constant source of stress and emotional turmoil. As the months passed, I found myself becoming increasingly withdrawn and anxious. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking on eggshells, constantly afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. The once charming partner I had fallen for had transformed into someone I no longer recognized, someone who seemed incapable of taking responsibility for their actions and who constantly sought to shift the blame onto others. It was a painful realization, but I knew I had to take a step back and reevaluate the situation. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly second-guessing myself and feeling like I was the one at fault. I needed to find the courage to confront the reality of the relationship and make a decision about the way forward. In the end, it was a difficult and emotional process, but I knew I had to put my well-being first. I had to break free from the cycle of manipulation and take back control of my own life. It wasn't easy, but I knew that I deserved better than to be constantly made to feel like the problem in my own relationship. The day I finally worked up the nerve to confront him was one of the hardest of my life. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say over and over in my head. I wanted to make it clear I wouldn't tolerate his toxic behavior anymore, but I knew he would try to flip the script and make me out to be the villain. Sure enough, as soon as I began explaining how his actions made me feel, he jumped in with excuses and finger-pointing. In his mind, none of it was his fault. I was being too sensitive, too demanding, too unreasonable. I refused to back down or get sucked into another endless argument going in circles. I stood firm in my resolve and made it clear I was leaving the relationship for good. Of course, he pulled out all the stops: tears, pleas for another chance, promises he would change. But I knew from experience his words meant nothing without action to back them up. Walking away from that relationship was the hardest, yet most empowering, thing I've ever done. For so long, I had let him convince me that I was the problem, that everything was my fault. Leaving him behind made me realize that I am not responsible for another person's behaviors or happiness. In the weeks that followed, I experienced a roller coaster of emotions: grief, anger, sadness, relief. I allowed myself to fully process it all, with the help of supportive friends and a therapist. Unpacking the manipulation and toxicity of the relationship was an important part of my healing process. With time and distance, I regained a sense of self-trust that had been badly eroded. I promised myself I would never again ignore the red flags in a relationship. My needs mattered just as much as anyone else's. I knew now that I deserved a partner who could take accountability and work through issues in a healthy way. Though it was a painful chapter, I emerged wiser and stronger. I learned to value my own voice and needs. I realized how vital it is to preserve your sense of self in a relationship, rather than compromising your values or accepting harm to your mental health. While the scars from that traumatic relationship may linger, they remind me how far I've come. I surround myself with people who lift me up rather than tear me down. Most importantly, I make sure any romantic partner is capable of empathy, compromise, and taking responsibility, the building blocks of a healthy, supportive relationship. Though it took finding myself in an unhealthy situation to fully recognize the signs, I'm grateful for the lessons it taught me. I know now what I absolutely will not accept from a partner, and that I deserve to be cherished for who I am. My sense of self-worth no longer hinges on how someone else treats me. I've reclaimed my voice, and I'll never again let anyone try to silence or blame me unfairly. Leaving was the right choice, and it gave me back my power. I met him at a party a few months ago, and I was instantly drawn to his charismatic personality. He had this infectious energy that just made you want to be around him. We hit it off immediately and started dating soon after. In the beginning, everything was amazing. He was so fun and exciting, always coming up with new ideas for dates and adventures. We would go on impromptu road trips, check out new restaurants downtown, go salsa dancing, you name it. I felt like I was on cloud 9 whenever I was with him. For our 3-month anniversary, he surprised me with a weekend getaway to a cozy cabin in the mountains. We went hiking, made s'mores by the fire, and stayed up late talking and laughing. It was so romantic and fun. I found myself really falling for him. When we were together, nothing else mattered. It was like the rest of the world faded away, and it was just the two of us. But over time, I started to notice some concerning changes in his behavior. He would disappear for hours at a time, often late at night, and when he came back, he would be moody and distant. I would ask where he was, or if everything was okay, and he would snap at me, telling me to stop nagging him. There were sudden mood swings where he would go from being the life of the party to barely speaking a word. His usual boundless energy turned into sullen apathy. He also became increasingly irresponsible, missing work and forgetting important commitments. I'd have to constantly remind him about things and even wake him up in the morning since he kept sleeping through his alarm. He stopped making an effort in the relationship, canceling our dates last minute or just not showing up. When I asked him about it, he would always brush it off, saying he was just stressed or tired. I wanted to believe him, so I didn't push too hard. I figured everyone has their ups and downs, and I didn't want to be that clingy, overbearing girlfriend. Maybe he was just going through a phase, I told myself. But then, one day, I stumbled upon something that made my heart sink. I was looking for a document on his laptop when I accidentally opened a hidden folder. What I found there was evidence that he had been struggling with a serious addiction, most likely to drugs or gambling. There were receipts, strange messages, and other telltale signs that painted a very troubling picture. I confronted him about it, and he finally confessed. He had been battling this addiction for years, and it had been spiraling out of control. The mood swings, the disappearances, all of it was because he was using and then crashing. He apologized for letting it impact our relationship, and he promised me that he would get help, that he would change, that he would do whatever it took to get his life back on track. I wanted to believe him, I really did. Part of me still cared about him deeply and didn't want to give up. After all, everyone makes mistakes, and he was being so sincere and vulnerable now. Maybe this could be the wake-up call he needed to turn his life around. So I decided to stay and support him through the process. I went with him to counseling sessions, NA meetings, and rehab check-ins. I was there on the good days when he seemed determined and hopeful, and the bad days when he was angry and depressed. I spent countless nights worrying about him, wondering if he was okay or if he had relapsed. It was emotionally exhausting, and it was starting to take a toll on my own mental and physical well-being. After a particularly bad relapse, I realized I was in far too deep. As much as I cared about him, I couldn't keep putting myself through this endless cycle of promises, hope, and disappointment. I had to accept that his addiction was not something I could fix or control. He had to be the one to face it head-on. I knew I had to make a difficult decision. As much as I cared about him, I couldn't keep putting myself through this. I had to put my own needs first. So, with a heavy heart, I made the decision to end the relationship. It wasn't easy. There were a lot of tears and hurt feelings on both sides. He pleaded with me to stay, vowing again that this time would be different. But I knew in my core that I had to walk away, as painful as it was. I still think back fondly on our first few blissful months together, before the chaos and anxiety set in. But I know that going back would only lead me down the same destructive path. Looking back, I can see now how quickly I was pulled into his world, how his charisma and energy had blinded me to the underlying issues. I had been so caught up in the thrill of our relationship that I didn't see the warning signs until it was almost too late. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes the most charming and exciting people can also be the most troubled and destructive. I'm still healing from that experience, but I'm grateful that I had the strength to walk away before it completely consumed me. It's a painful lesson, but one that I hope will make me wiser and more discerning in the future. I know now that sometimes you have to put your own well-being first, no matter how much you care about someone. It's a difficult but necessary choice. I don't regret our relationship because he taught me so much about myself, what I want out of life, and what I'm willing to accept. I sincerely hope he gets the help he needs and finds peace. But I can't be the one to rescue him or sacrifice myself in the process. I have to look out for me first. It's not selfish, it's self-care. and it's a lesson I'll carry with me as I move forward, a little wiser and a little stronger. I still remember the first time I saw him across the crowded bar. He had this effortless charm about him that immediately drew me in. When our eyes met, he flashed me a smile that made my heart skip a beat. I knew in that moment that I had to talk to him. We hit it off right away. The conversation flowed so easily between us, and he had me completely enthralled with his stories of adventures traveling the globe. He told me about hiking through the Amazon rainforest, seeing ancient ruins in Peru, scuba diving on the Great Barrier Reef. He had been to places I had only seen in movies or read about in books. It all sounded so exciting and free-spirited. After that night, we started dating and spending all our free time together. He would take me to new restaurants in the city and tell me about the exotic cuisines he had tried on his travels to Morocco, India, Thailand. We would go to art galleries and museums, where he would point out rare artifacts he recognized from his time studying abroad in Europe. He seemed so worldly and cultured in a way no one I had dated before ever was. I loved listening to his stories, imagining myself right there alongside him on these incredible adventures. He made everything sound so vivid and real, with details about the sights, sounds, and smells of each location. I started envisioning a future together traveling the world, never settling down in one place for too long, but always on to the next thrilling destination. It sounded magical. A few months into the relationship, little inconsistencies in his stories started to emerge. He referred to places he had supposedly visited by the wrong name, like calling Prague Budapest, and vice versa. He mixed up details or forgot key characters in his accounts. They were small things that seemed innocent enough, so I let them slide. But over time, the inconsistencies became harder to ignore. One night, he was telling me about a month he spent working on a vineyard in Tuscany. It sounded amazing, but I knew he had told me before that he spent that summer backpacking in Prague. When I brought up this discrepancy, he got really defensive and evasive. I dropped it, but I felt uneasy. I started to test him, casually asking questions about his past experiences to see how he would respond. He fumbled over dates and locations. He would tell the same story again, but the details would change. The timeline didn't make sense. The more I probed, the more contradictions emerged. Eventually, I sat him down for a serious conversation. I told him kindly, but directly, that I didn't understand why he fabricated so many stories. At first he denied it, getting angry that I would ever accuse him of lying. But I stood firm, giving example after example, until finally his facade crumbled. He broke down and confessed that almost everything he had told me was either highly exaggerated or completely made up. He had never traveled extensively or held any of the exciting jobs he told me about. I was in shock and felt so betrayed. I thought I knew this man, but now I realized I didn't know him at all. Over the next few weeks, the full truth came out slowly and painfully. He admitted that he had constructed this fantasy life to escape his mundane reality and impress people. Most of his friends didn't even know the extent of his lies either. He had gotten so deep into living this alter ego that he didn't know how to get out of it. I was devastated. Our whole relationship was built on a sham. I had fallen in love with someone who didn't really exist. For a while I tried to make sense of it all, but ultimately I knew I could never trust him again. The wound of his betrayal was too deep. I ended the relationship, though it broke my heart to walk away. He begged me to stay, promising he would change and be honest from now on. But the damage was already done. I had to accept that the man I thought I knew was just a figment of my imagination, propped up by a tangled web of lies. In the aftermath, I was left feeling foolish for being so easily duped. But I also felt sad for him, knowing that his compulsive lying was likely tied to much deeper issues of insecurity and shame. I hope he seeks help, but that's out of my hands now. I am much warier when meeting new people these days. It will take time to rebuild my ability to trust completely. I find myself constantly searching for those little red flags now. Inconsistencies in stories, evasive answers, fudged timelines. I have become almost hypervigilant, which probably isn't healthy either. I need to work on finding a balance between protecting myself and still being open to love. This experience also made me re-examine myself and the role I played in it all. In hindsight, there were warning signs I overlooked because I was so enamored by the fantasy he wove. I moved too fast, without taking the time to really verify who he was. I ignored my own doubts and rationalizations because I wanted so badly for the fairy tale to be real. So while he is fully responsible for the lies, I am accountable for my own gullibility and willingness to suspend disbelief. I have to learn to trust my gut instincts instead of just getting swept up in an enchanting story. Fantasy is seductive, but I'd rather have truth, even if real life is a little less glamorous. I am grateful for the lessons this experience taught me, about moving slowly in relationships, listening closely for inconsistencies, and watching for red flags. It showed me the value of honesty, trust, and living authentically. While the deception hurt, I emerged wiser and stronger, with a greater sense of what I need and deserve in a partner. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.